Think of the last joke you heard about America. Ice in everything, a tank just to fetch the milk, and a price tag that quietly turns into a different number at the till. All of it true. All of it written into law first, and most of it written harsher on the old continent. That's the part that never survives the telling. Behind every American habit we find ridiculous, there's a statute with a date and a committee and a vote behind it. And behind our own version of the same habit, there's usually a second statute, older, blunter, and quietly worse. Neither ever makes it into the joke, which works because a line has been taken out of it. Germany spent this year arguing about whether its own shops may open on a Sunday, over a clause written in 1919. A law we wrote becomes a way of life. A law America wrote in 1975 becomes a personality. A cocktail cherry, a shop shutter coming down on a Sunday morning, and an egg sitting on an open shelf at room temperature. Today, let's delve into 10 laws Europeans never mention when they mock America, and put the deleted line back where it belongs. Number 10. The red pedestrian light. There's a fine in the German road traffic rules that no visitor believes exists until it's read out. It's 5 to 10 euros, the penalty for crossing an empty street against a red man at 6 in the morning. Meanwhile, Europe has spent 20 years retelling the same shock, the American officer writing a jaywalking ticket, a country so obsessed with the car that it criminalized the pedestrian. But look at which side has been repealing. California's Freedom to Walk Act, signed in September 2022, narrows the moment an officer may stop you at all, down to the case where a reasonably careful person would see an immediate danger of collision. Cross an empty street in Dusseldorf, and it's still 5 euros. In Germany, a red pedestrian light is not simply a piece of advice. It is an invoice with a number written on it. Imagine you're standing at an empty German curb in the rain at 5:30 in the morning, waiting for permission from a lamp, and feeling rather superior to a country 3,000 miles away. Would you rather judge an empty road yourself, or be charged 5 euros for judging it correctly? And which of those two countries is treating you like an adult? But the crossing is only the pedestrian half of the street. The American driving rule that gets mocked hardest wasn't written by a traffic engineer. It was written in an oil crisis. Number 9. The right turn on red. Ask a European driver about the American right turn on red, and the sentence arrives already assembled. Reckless, lawless, a country that can't be bothered to stop when the light says so. But that was before anybody checked who wrote it, and the answer has nothing to do with traffic. It was an energy decision. The oil crisis of the 1970s sent Western governments hunting for fuel savings, and one place they looked was the car idling at an empty junction. Moreover, the Energy Policy and Conservation Act, signed on 22 December 1975, tied federal energy assistance to a condition. A state that wanted the money had to permit right turns on red to the maximum extent practicable, consistent with safety. 13 states allowed it in 1972, and nearly all 50 by the end of that decade. So the move Europe reads as American impatience was written to save gas. The turn is not recklessness. It is an energy policy. Tell us in the comments which of these laws you would repeal first. And if a traffic lamp can be an energy policy, a sweet can be a chemistry argument. Take down the jar on the top shelf. Number 8. The cocktail cherry. Reach into the cupboard of any bar in Lyon or Lisbon and take down the jar at the back. The cherries inside are a red no fruit has ever produced. That color has a European code number, E127, erythrocene. And Europe has one favorite shock about American food. Repeated so often, it no longer needs evidence. American food is poison. But on 15 January 2025, Washington revoked the authorization for that color in food and in swallowed medicines. Brussels did nothing of the kind. Under the European additives list, E127 remains authorized for one purpose only: cocktail and candied cherries, at up to 200 milligrams per kilo. and the smallest detail finishes it. West Yorkshire Trading Standards ordered a bakery in Leeds to stop using American sprinkles because they carried the same molecule that sits legally in the jar behind the bar. The owner, who had to pull his best-selling cookie, called the decision ridiculous and said the sprinkles he is allowed to use instead are rubbish. Banned in a sprinkle, lawful in a cherry, provided the cherry is on its way into a drink. That isn't simply a food standard, it is a shopping list. Nobody has ever explained what the cherry did to earn the exemption. Which is the better arrangement, being told which color was withdrawn and when, or assuming your shelf is clean because nobody mentioned it? And if a cherry survived a chemistry argument, there's something in every sandwich shop on the old continent that didn't survive a tax argument. Number 7. The sugar in the bread. On 29 September 2020, 5 judges of Ireland's Supreme Court found that the bread in a heated sandwich wasn't, in law, bread. The case was brought by an Irish franchisee, arguing its bread was a staple food and therefore exempt from VAT. Ireland's Value-Added Tax Act of 1972 says the sugar in a bread product may not exceed 2% of the weight of the flour, and the product in front of the court came in at roughly 10%, 5 times the limit written into a European Finance Act half a century ago. The judges called it a confectionery and sent the tax bill back. Now hold that beside the line all of us have heard at a dinner table. American bread is cake. The line is true, and it was tested in a Dublin court under an Irish statute, on a loaf baked in Ireland, because a European tax code needed to know which shelf it belonged on. The joke didn't come out of a bakery, it came out of a tax code. If you've ever repeated the cake line, tell us in the comments whether you knew which country proved it. Would you rather have your bread defined by a baker or by a schedule in a finance act? And whose definition would you trust with your own kitchen? But that was only a tax argument about flour. There's one object with 2 opposite laws written about it, sitting in an American fridge and on a European shelf at the same hour of the same day. Number 6. The egg on the shelf. The old continent's favorite culture shock is the American refrigerator. Why would anyone chill an egg? It is our most repeated proof that Americans don't understand food. But nobody repeating it has read either of the 2 laws involved. In the United States, the USDA grading service requires the eggs to be spray-washed in warm water, given a sanitizing rinse, and air-dried by a specified method. Once the eggs have been washed, a second rule takes over, and shell eggs, held or moved, must sit at or below 45 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 7 degrees Celsius, from 36 hours after the time of lay. Now, the European text, in its own words, Class A eggs shall not be washed or cleaned, before or after grading, and shall not be chilled in premises where the temperature is artificially maintained below 5 degrees Celsius. Brussels gives its reason as condensation. A cold egg carried into a warm room sweats, and the water walks bacteria through the shell. Wash the egg in Ohio, and you're then required to chill it. Refuse to wash it in Lyon, and you're forbidden to. Nevertheless, the European mechanism does work. British hens are vaccinated against salmonella under the Lion Code, and the Food Standards Agency puts the risk to a shopper at very low. But that isn't what the joke says. The joke says Americans don't understand food, when 2 governments are issuing opposite orders about one object. The cold egg is not simply a habit. It is an order issued by a government, and there are 2 continents, 1 egg, and nobody thought to ask the hen. But an egg is a small thing. The law that changed the shape of the American road was also written about a bird, and it started in Paris and Bonn. Number 5. The tariff that built the pickup. Stay with the chicken for a moment, because in 1964, France and West Germany put tariffs on American poultry. Washington answered with a 25% tariff on imported light trucks. That tariff was never lifted. It is still collected today, 60 years after the argument that caused it. And Europe sees a character flaw in the result. The ridiculous American truck, the one parked outside a primary school with a hood you could serve dinner on. Whole columns get written about American masculinity by people who have never typed the words light truck tariff. Then the second law, stranger than the first. For 20 years, American passenger cars met a single fuel economy standard, while light trucks were held to a softer one. When the rules were rewritten, they were tied to the vehicle's footprint, the rectangle its wheels stand on. And here, the arithmetic runs the way you would least expect. As the footprint gets larger, the standard gets easier, and it became more profitable to build the vehicle bigger than to build it cleaner. A rule, written to shrink fuel consumption, made the vehicles grow. The pickup isn't a personality, it's a tariff with wheels. Somewhere in Michigan, a truck grew because a formula in Washington rewarded the footprint, and a European columnist watched it arrive and wrote 900 words about the American soul. Honestly, which of those two things actually explains the truck? In your opinion, is a country better explained by its character or by the two paragraphs that built the thing you're pointing at? And every item on this list has the same hole in it. The law is public, dated, and free to read, and it still never makes it into the joke, which is not an accident. Why the law gets deleted? There's a reason, and it isn't ignorance. Nobody has ever felt superior to a paragraph. A habit that comes from national character is a story about people, told at a dinner table with a glass in your hand, whereas the same habit coming from a subsection of a 1975 Energy Act is a story about a committee. Only one of those is entertainment. However, there is also the arithmetic of it. Naming the American law obliges you to name the European one standing beside it. Say the tipped wage has been frozen since 1991, and you've admitted the habit has a date, and anything with a date can be set beside your own and measured. And the oldest reason of all is this: our own laws have gone invisible to us because they are so deeply ingrained. A clause written into a constitution in 1919 stops feeling like a rule and starts feeling like Sunday. A directive from 1998 stops feeling like a rule and starts feeling like a price. We stopped hearing our legislation as legislation generations ago, and what's left is a feeling we call culture. So it holds in both directions. In Europe, the paragraph is heritage. In America, the identical paragraph is a symptom. That's the deleted line. And it is not a lie or propaganda or anything so organized, just the one sentence that would spoil the story, left on the floor every time. Seriously, how many of the things you believe about America have you ever checked against the law that caused them? And when did anybody last read you one of ours? But there's exactly one item on this list where putting the line back doesn't help America at all. Number 4. The wage frozen. In 1991. The tip is the loudest shock the old continent still reports about America, and it's the only complaint on this list that survives being checked. The federal cash wage for a tipped worker in the United States is $2.13 an hour. It has been $2.13 since April 1991, never indexed and never revisited. That's a paragraph nobody should be asked to defend. But the joke stops reading before the paragraph does, because the employer owes the difference. If tips don't reach $7.25, the employer must make up every cent of the gap, so nobody is lawfully earning $2.13 for a shift. And 7 states refuse the arrangement outright: Alaska, California, Minnesota, Montana, Nevada, Oregon, and Washington require the full state minimum in cash before a single tip is counted. Americans already live under the system the old continent believes it invented. And the European alternative was never the absence of a rule. It's a different rule, with its arithmetic hidden inside. 10% is the accepted tip across most of the old continent, and in several countries, the honest answer is nothing at all, which is easy to call civilized when you aren't the one waiting on the tables. A waiter working in Europe went public a few years ago to say exactly that about European customers, and the continent argued about it for a week. A tip in America is not simply a gift, it's a wage that arrives late. Would you rather a wage floor you can read on a government page, or a service charge folded into the bill where you'll never find it? Because a charge you never find is how the old world works, and it starts with the week itself. Ours closes on a Sunday, and the reason is older than the supermarket. Number 3. The Sunday Shutter. It's 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning in Cologne, and the shopping street is closed end to end, every shutter down, no lights behind the glass, a city of 1 million people with nowhere to buy a liter of milk, all day. And the former continent tells itself a lovely story about that street. Balance, family, a society that didn't put everything up for sale, unlike America, where the doors never close. But it isn't a culture, it has a name and a number. The Ladenschlussgesetz, the Federal Shop Closing Act of 1956, requires shops to close to the public on Sundays and public holidays. When the department store chain Kaufhof challenged it, the Federal Constitutional Court pointed at Article 140 of the Basic Law, which does not contain the rule but imports it, from Article 139 of the Weimar Constitution of 1919, setting Sunday aside as a day of rest and spiritual elevation. In 2006, the power passed to the states, and every state used it to keep the closure. And the complaint is not American. The Berlin representative of Germany's own retail association put it plainly, that anyone who sells a shirt on a Sunday in Germany is committing a criminal offense, and in the online age that ought to be over. Then in 2009, the court told Berlin that opening on all 4 Sundays of Advent was unconstitutional, the busiest shopping weeks in the German calendar, and the highest court in the country said no. Imagine you're standing on a Berlin street in December, watching a city told by its own constitution which days it may sell a scarf. That is not simply a lifestyle, it is a constitutional clause with a date on it. Run out of milk on a Saturday evening in Cologne, and the answer is not a different shop or a later shop, it is Monday. Comment below with the strangest thing you've ever run out of on a Sunday. Do you prefer a shop that decides its own hours, or a court that decides them for the shop? And if a constitution can close a shop, a directive can hide a price. Look at the tag. Number 2. The price on the tag. There's one number in Europe that nobody has ever seen, and everybody has paid. It's on the front of the price tag, in plain sight, and it's invisible because a directive requires it to be. Meanwhile, the American price tag is the standing shock of every European shopping trip. You pick something up at $9.99, hand over $10.79, and the old continent calls it proof of a country that won't tell you the truth. But look at which side is doing the hiding. The European Pricing Directive, written in 1998, defines the selling price shown to a shopper as the final price, including VAT and every other tax. Not displayed alongside, included, folded in, so the shelf and the till agree, and the tax inside is never looked at. And the tax folded in there is enormous. The average standard VAT rate across the Union is 21.9%. The American figure, printed separately on a slip of paper the shop hands you, averages 7.53%. The worst state in the country for it is Louisiana, at 10.11%. And in most of America, the food itself goes untaxed because only 13 states still charge sales tax on groceries. 21.9 against 7.53, and only one of those two numbers has ever been printed where a shopper could read it. It is not the European one. The receipt is not simply rudeness. It is a disclosure, printed and dated and handed to you on the way out. The directive has taken roughly 1/5 of every purchase of our adult lives without once printing the figure where we could see it, and we cross an ocean and call the American till uncivilized. Honestly, would you rather see the tax and resent it every week, or never see it and never once think about it? And which of the two governments is actually asking your permission? But the largest deleted line has nothing to do with money. It runs every evening on American television, and it's the one Europe finds funniest. Number 1. The side effect list. Nothing gets laughed at harder over here than the American drug advertisement. The couple in the field, the dog, the low golden light, and under all of it, a flat, unhurried voice, reading out swelling, bleeding, and sudden thoughts of death in the time it takes the couple to reach the porch. We treat that voice as proof that America has sold its medicine to television. But listen to what it is actually doing. It isn't selling, it's complying. Under guidance, the American regulator drafted in 1997 and finalized in 1999, a broadcast advertisement for a prescription drug must carry what the rule calls a major statement of its most important risks, and must point the viewer at a doctor, a website, a toll-free number, or a printed advertisement for the rest. The regulator later proposed that the statement be delivered in a clear, conspicuous, and neutral manner. The shock isn't the list, it is who ordered it read. The list is the price of being allowed to run one. Somebody wrote that down. Now the European answer to the same problem. The European Medicines Directive, written in 2001, does not demand a better advertisement. It forbids the advertisement. Advertising a prescription medicine to the general public is prohibited across the Union, and only 2 countries on the planet permit it: the United States and New Zealand. So Europe didn't fix the advertisement. It removed the patient from the conversation entirely. Think about what that means at the level of one living room. In Ohio, the television says the name of a drug and, in the same breath, what it can do to a liver. Most of the people hearing it will never take it. One of them will, and will ask a question at the next appointment that nobody would otherwise have known to ask. They were told, badly, but told. In Bavaria, the same room hears nothing because somebody decided the sentence was too much for it. One continent trusted a citizen with an ugly list. The other decided the list was a risk to public order. Comment below with the strangest side effect you've ever heard read out on an American channel, and whether you knew a regulator ordered it read. Honestly, would you rather be handed the whole list and left to decide what to do with it, or be protected from the list by a paragraph you never voted for? Do you prefer a government that trusts you with an ugly sentence, or one that keeps the sentence away from you? Whose laws are these? 10 habits and 10 statutes, every one public and dated, and not one ever quoted in the joke it explains. Ultimately, America isn't governed better than the old continent, but a country that argues about its statutes loudly, in public, in front of anybody who cares to watch, is not the same animal as a continent that has stopped noticing it has any. So, one question. If you had to live under one statute book, would you choose the one that prints its tax on the receipt and its side effects on the screen, or the one that folds the tax into the price and takes the list away for your own good? Leave your answer below, and name the one law Europeans never mention that surprised you most. If putting the deleted line back changed how one of these sounds, a like helps this reach the people still telling the old version of it. And press subscribe, with the notification bell on, so nothing gets past you the next time a sentence everybody repeats is taken apart to find the paragraph under it. A note on this video. It was assembled from published legislation, court rulings, regulatory guidance, and official statistics for discussion and comparison. Nothing in it is legal, financial, or medical advice, and nothing in it represents the official view of any government or company mentioned.